This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, folks, let's get everybody settled down. In the absence of the chair, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Kendall?
Thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and get started with our roll call. Brian Yanta. Dave Ledman.
Present.
Thank you. Derek Bays.
Here.
Thank you. Debbie Reed.
Here.
Thank you. Nefi Garza. Thank you. Kara Tackett. Jeff Carroll.
Here.
Thank you, Jeff. Sabrina Santiago.
Present.
Thank you. John Beasley. Suzanne Scott. Jose Reyes.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Mock.
Here.
Thank you, Dave. Suzanne just joined us. Donovan Burton.
Here.
Thank you. Carly Rotzler, Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Here.
Thank you, Carly. Fernando Perez with Texas Division of Emergency Management.
Hi, how you doing? This is Fernando.
Thank you, sir. Miss Jamie McCool. Thank you, Jamie. Jared Bowen, Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board. Jared, you're online. I'm going to count it anyways. Chris Robles, General Land Office.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Tressa Olson, Texas Water Development Board.
I'm here.
Thank you, ma'am. Secretary, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Kendall. Item number 2 on our agenda is public commentary. If there's anyone signed up to speak.
Sir, no one has signed up to speak today.
Thank you. Number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the prior Water Development Board Regional Floodplain Group meeting. Do we have a motion? Thank you. Motion by Donovan and second by Debbie Reed. We have a vote on this. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Then the meeting minutes from the past meeting are approved. Communications from the Water Development Board, please.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce Miss Tressa Olson. She will be Region 12's new Texas Water Development Board liaison. Miss Anita Machiavello has moved on, and we are very excited to welcome Tressa to her first planning group meeting today.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. I have a few updates. Starting back last year in October, the flood planning team sent out communication via email regarding guidance for amending the 2023 regional flood plans. The TWDB has prepared additional guidance on developing these amendments and submitting them to best align with the 2026-27 Flood Infrastructure Fund, or FIF cycle. The deadline for submitting amendments to the TWDB is April 1st, and this information is posted to our website. Next, we hosted a second cycle contract kickoff webinar in November of 2024, and this was to go over contract details, new scope of work tasks, payment requests, and amendment guidance, also posted to our website. Next, the TWDB hosted a payment request webinar on Thursday, January 9th. This webinar covered advances, the payment request checklist, and eligible and ineligible expenses. The recording and the slideshow are also available on our website. Let's see. Finally, we hosted a conference call on Friday, January 31st, and this was with chairs, sponsors, and technical consultants. This was to go over the Exhibit C and D guidance documents to answer any questions that folks may have had on those. Updates on available data that we are providing and potential schedule changes. And with that, I think there's some slides. There we go. So going into the schedule changes, we received a few months ago a request from several from FNI, Freeze and Nichols, on behalf of several regions, to push back some of the deadlines for the interim deliverables. These include the technical memorandum, which was scheduled to be submitted to us by September 19th, I believe, of this year. The request was to push that back to December. The next is the list of FMEs for TWDB to perform. I believe the original deadline was January of 2026. And then the draft plan due February, I believe, it's hard to read there, of 2026. So we, again, met on January 31st. We received feedback from a representative from all of the regional flood planning groups. Didn't hear any pushback on changing the dates. So we are trying to meet that request by shifting everything back a little bit. And a little bit more background, the request came because TWDB took longer than expected to provide y'all with both the Exhibit C and D, as well as some of the required information to develop your plans. So here you can see the existing deadlines for those 3 deliverables, as well as the proposed deadlines. So shifting the tech memo by several months, I think it's 4.5. The list of FMEs to be performed by TWDB by 3 months, and then the draft plans by 3 months. So next steps will be to amend, if you all are amenable to that change, will be to have the sponsor amend the contract with TWDB and then amend the subcontracts with the technical consultants. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
This is Debbie Reed, and I was just wondering, do we have a copy of these slides, or will we be able to have those?
Yes, I can send those out to you, Ms. Reed.
David, can I just ask a question? Do our technical consultants have any concerns about these changes? You're fine. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We agreed to these.
Okay.
And I just saw that Reem joined the call, so if you guys have any questions, it's a great time to ask.
Okay, any further discussion on this?
Quick question. Will we have to do any action with regard to these changes?
Yes, the news from TWDB was released after our agenda had been posted, and because of that, it'll be an action item for our March planning group meeting. We'll be able to, at that time, request authorization from the planning group to amend our TWDB River Authority contract to have these updated dates in the deliverables. And then we will also ask for authorization to change the River Authority HDR contract as needed to have those deliverables match and have the language be the same. So that'll be an action item in March.
Great, we look forward to that agenda item then for discussion purposes. Like to recognize the arrival of the board chair, Mr. Derek Bays. We're moving on to item 5 for the chair report, just in time.
Thanks. Apologies. I-35 is awesome. Ken, you want to go to the slides? There we go. Thank you. So Water Development Board recently released the rankings for the abridged FIF applications. They're not new rankings for the 2024 plan, but they're rankings of the FMPs and FMEs that were submitted for FIF in 24-25. So there were 2 FMPs from Region 12 that were submitted, and that's on the slide you see right there. So the city of San Antonio and one from Carnes, both ranked top 20. And then there were 13 FMEs from Region 12 that were submitted. This shows the top 5 ranked ones of those of those 13 that were submitted. Let that digest for a second.
And Chair, for this round of funding anyway, that was a $375 million statewide. Is that correct, Ron? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So once the public comment period closes, the Water Development Board will vote to approve the rankings, and then we'll invite applicants to submit full applications. And we also assume that the invitations will be based on availability of funds. So we got the 2, Kendall, if you flip back briefly. So the 2 there from Region 12, and then 20 I'm sorry, I keep saying 20. 13 FMEs from Region 12 were submitted, and that slide shows the top 5. Kendall has the full list for those that want to see it. There we go. Go ahead, Debbie.
Question. Looking at these spreadsheets and being in the comment period, I was just wondering if there are some specifics that would be appropriate for this group to look at and trying to evaluate and make those comments in a good way.
So spreadsheets with more detailed information are available on the Texas Water Development Board's website. I can make sure that you guys all got the email. I can send that out again that they sent to, I'm not sure which mailing list exactly, but notifications about this prioritization list. I can make sure you get that email with all the right links in it. And so that shows more detailed information. Of course, for the slides, we only picked a few of the points. And it goes into how they scored, why they prioritized that way. But again, like Derek said, we are unsure what that means for which projects and evaluations will be invited to apply further. And so just because the projects, those 2 that were submitted from Region 12 are in the top 20, we don't know if that means that they're going to be funded or anything like that. But I can send you the information that is available.
Thank you, Kendall. Does that mean that the information that link is different from what the Texas Water Development Board sent out, those links?
No, that's just, it links to their website where you can find the spreadsheets.
Okay, yeah, got that.
Yes, Suzanne?
I realize that I think our next meeting is after the public comment period is over, right? So I'm just curious, should we as a regional planning group submit support for the projects in Region 12 that made the list? And just do a
sort of a blanket, we support the rankings, because I think that's honestly about the best, from my view, what we could do.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that we, support the process and the rankings, and that we're just kind of adding to the public comment that these projects are important to address the needs of our region. I was just curious, because obviously I would imagine public comment in support is always good for our partners, and I want to show support for the partners. So I don't know what's appropriate. This is the first time we've been in this situation, right. So I don't know what is the role of the regional planning group in this process. I just want to know. I just would like to be able to show our support for. And I don't know if I mean, honestly, sure, we could all go in individually and make public comments, but I mean, asking each of us to do that is probably not going to result in much, just because we're busy, everyone's busy. But if there was some way that we could, as a group, say, that we're supporting the projects that were listed in the prioritized list, is that
we don't, I mean,
possible?
I'm very comfortable as chair, submitting a letter. We don't have any sort of board action agendized, but I am more than comfortable doing that in my role
So
if
we-
people are comfortable with that.
So we could generally say, even though, since it's, I know it's not on here for action, but it's part of your report, that we could say that we would urge you
Mhm.
to write a support letter as chair on behalf of the planning group, that we support this prioritized list for the projects for our region. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
Okay.
And something, you know, in my putting the other hat on for Sarah, I'm thinking through submitting a letter supporting just our project rankings. I would encourage Bear to do the same, and then those others that were ranked on either list, and we can reach out to the appropriate ones that are not represented. But I think that it can't hurt, is how I would look at that.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, that concludes my chair report. We're going to move on to item number 6, which is the technical committee update. Mr. Dave Wegman.
Thank you, Derek. We met approximately 2 weeks ago to have a discussion about the various amendments to the existing flood plan that was submitted. There was various project sponsors for these projects, San Antonio Water System, San Antonio River Authority, and predominantly the city of San Antonio. We took a hard look at these projects, and we wanted to come back the next time the technical committee met with kind of a scrubbed list, a prioritization. There was some discussion between the city of San Antonio, the group, and our technical consultant regarding the eligibility of all the projects that were submitted. The technical consultant was at that point directed to go back, take a look at the actual technical requirements and eligibility of the projects that were submitted, and to scrub this list down to something more manageable. I'll let Ron speak to that a little bit if you'd like to. No? Oh. Got you.
Yeah, because 6 and 7 are very related on the agenda. So,
Ron or Neffy, Neffy or Jose, did you have anything to add since you were part of that group?
The only thing I'd like to add is that we did take some action as a group to identify a lead for our group to be a little bit more organized. I thought the meeting went excellent. I thought there was some very good dynamic discussion, and thanks to Ron and his team for some of the good dialogue that we had. But it did emphasize, and I kind of walked away thinking, we really need to look at some of the detail on some of these projects, particularly with regard to the scope. I know there's a number of projects that were identified, that were submitted, that was determined that they didn't necessarily qualify for the scope and the size. But I hope it doesn't deter others from submitting projects, because I think it's important that projects still start coming in, because the need is great in our watershed. And it's still dominated quite a bit by some of these larger entities. So I'm hopeful that we can start receiving projects from some of the smaller communities, because the need is great in our watershed. But no, the meeting turned out very, very well.
I thought it was a good meeting, and I thought the process was positive. And I do think, just as we get better at this, this is not the last time. I mean, we kept telling everybody, if it doesn't make it through this amendment process, doesn't mean that we can't bring them forward through the planning process. So we want to do, as Neffy was saying, to encourage that we move projects along, whether it's this amendment process or the full planning process.
all right, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 7, which is discussion and appropriate action to proceed with an amendment to the Region 12 2023 plan to make the Water Development Board deadline of April 1st. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron and our technical team to talk through the proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm segueing right in from what Dave was talking about. You have a spreadsheet in front of you. These are the projects that we collected, all of the projects that we collected as part of the submissions for amendment. We met with the technical committee, and we went through and we have now put them in and ranked them as their completeness. So there's only a few projects left. With a 1 means they're complete and will be. We have all of the information needed to include in the amendments. The 2s that you see on the list are those which we've taken a look at and we've talked with the entity, and we have a commitment by them or the consulting team us to make sure that we deliver those and can get those done in the timeline needed. And then there are the 3s. A lot of those 3s were identified as projects that for the city of San Antonio that were local flood projects. Those local flood projects weren't regional projects, weren't necessarily riverine projects, weren't part of a regulatory floodplain. Therefore, we're not eligible for the project. However, after looking at them, we think that there are some that through the next part of the process where we can develop a floodplain for those. And incorporate that into that are on the edge of the floodplain, or that we can extend the floodplain up a tributary. So we will be able to, during our FME and FMP process this next go around, we think we'll be able to incorporate some of these into the project. So at the end, we were left with. I have a summary here. There were COSA had 4 FMPs and 8 FMEs. The River Authority had 3 FMPs and 2 FMEs, and SAWS has 1 FME, for a total of 7 FMPs identified for the amendment and 11 FMEs. So that is the list you have in front of you, and as part of what we are required to do, we are required to get approval for the consulting team to move forward with an amendment. And so we're looking for approval of this list to move forward with an amendment with the FMPs and FMEs identified, the 7 FMPs and the 11 FMEs identified in the list.
And I understand, Dave, from the technical committee that y'all have recommended to proceed with these proposed amendments in this ranking, the tiers, the 1, 2, 3.
Yes, that was our direction.
Okay. Any comments or questions specifically for Ron and the technical team? Okay.
Ron,
Oh, sorry, Dave.
sorry. So let me understand. So all of these that are scratched out is because of insufficient data, or that they're out of the floodplain?
Not really insufficient data. Some of them didn't meet the 1 square mile because they were the local flood type projects. The city of San Antonio has a ton of the local flood type projects where it floods. It's not a regional project. What was the original
So
intent?
we won't be seeing those again.
We think that some of these may be able to be incorporated. They're big enough that, because we have the ability as a planning group to waive the 1 square mile. But we need to look and see, is it truly a local project or is it a regional project? And we'll have to, if we're going to add that, we'll need to make sure that our floodplain, which is the floodplain that we score by, we regulate by, doesn't have to be the effective floodplain. It has to be a floodplain that we identify how we are identifying risk. And so that on some of these areas, we may need to add them to the floodplain, or at the areas, or again, like I said, you may have to map further up a tributary, or map something that's connected, but not necessarily because it was too small to make the FEMA map. So those are potentially, some of the FMEs and FMPs we can look at for the future phases.
Any other comments or questions? Yes,
I just wanted some clarification. I know that at the meeting we talked about the benefit to cost calculations and using the FEMA, I guess the revised calculations from, what did we call it, Region 6 or something? And that's going to be used for the benefit cost? Because that's where we talked about, because Abigail mentioned in that calculation is where some of the nature-based assessments, you would be looking at that during the benefit cost calculation. And is that need to be done as part of this amendment? That would be done before April 1st?
This would not be calculating any new BCAs. All of there were 2 projects that needed BCAs. So the BCA that was attached to the project will be the BCA that remains for the project.
Ron, if you recall, the discussion was about that the new BCA calculator by Region 6 does allow for green infrastructure,
Right.
particularly for specific techniques that include rain gardens, green roofs, trees, and I forget what the fourth one is. Permeable pavement. And that for each 4 of those was calculating certain benefits from there. Obviously, not knowing the full scope on some of these projects, I don't know if these projects include any of that. But I think the direction that we're hoping is that new ability to calculate that becomes included in there. And maybe it's at a future date because it's pretty new, and I'm sure some of these projects didn't necessarily account for that. But I wanted to make the point, and I think Suzanne, I think you're kind of reaching for that as well, is that we make that a priority, and that we include some of those green infrastructure techniques into these projects, so that we can gain some of that benefit, because that's always where we're struggling with.
And those extra points, I think we talked about too, that could come. Granted, it's not a lot, but I mean, you were saying that in the process of this evaluation to try to make these projects present as well as possible, given the point system. So you don't have to go through and re-look at because some of these projects were not submitted previously if it's an amendment. That's what I'm trying to understand.
The BCA was provided to us with the majority of the projects.
Already calculated. But not based on the new recipe.
Not based on the new, but we would not, we're not scoped to do a new FEMA BCA for all of the FMEs and FMPs. So, I mean, that would be something, Neffy, what we would have to do is, as part of the group, identify those that are, because we didn't, HDR or the planning team did not, the consulting team did not develop each one of the BCAs. The BCA could have been developed by the River Authority. We could have, and what methodology they used, they don't even have to provide that to us. We just have to have a BCA that's connected to that. So if we want to go back and look at BCAs that were, if we want to go back in and identify projects as part of the FME and FMP identification process, if we want to go back in and relook at a handful of projects that we know that would have a green infrastructure component, and see if the BCA would significantly improve those, we could take a look at that and then maybe extrapolate. If we decided that made a huge difference, then we could look at more projects. But that would probably be done in a later phase.
But the Water Development Board is not requiring that each of the BCAs be done the same methodology.
That's correct.
Interesting. But they did, for the projects that were submitted into the plan, all had to go through the same calculation. I mean, there was a common calculation that was done in the plan that was originally submitted.
No.
It was not. You did not have to use the same BCA.
If one was provided with the project, that is what we used.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
All right, thank you. If there's no other comments or questions, I'm looking for a motion to authorize the technical consultants to proceed with an amendment to the Region 12 2023 flood plan to be reviewed by the Water Development Board by the April 1st, 2025 deadline. So if I'm looking for a motion and a second, please.
Debbie Reed, motion to accept this list of projects to move forward for the April deadline.
Thank you, Debbie.
Dave Wegman, second.
Dave, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion is approved. Thank you. And I'll just, before we move on to item 8, I'll just say, there was a comment about funding, and there's never enough. I think whether that's flood or water supply or whatever, if you're following the state legislature, which is in session right now, there's been a lot of talk about this is going to be a water-focused session. Water, and I'll just say water, which is primarily water supply, but flood is in that mix too. It's on the governor's list of priorities. It's on the lieutenant governor's list. Right now in the initial budgets, we see $2.5 billion in both the House and the Senate side. But there has been talk as much as $5 billion for water this session coming from the surplus. And also, we will likely see a push for a $1 billion annual water to fund water for the next 20 years. That is the talk. The bills are not filed yet, but I would encourage you, if you're on this committee or you have stakeholders that you're aware of, to watch for those items, read them. But from my perspective as the head of SARA, we will be supportive of those efforts. Water funds, there are severe shortages in the state of water supply. We know that there are flood issues. This committee, has been dealing with that for the last few years. So I would just encourage you in your roles outside of Region 12 to take a look at those and to consider supporting, those efforts through your elected representatives and so on, or any other professional organizations you may be involved with. I also know that we have multiple members of this committee that are members of the City of San Antonio's Stormwater Committee, Advisory Committee. I think I have that right. Yeah, it was a big mouthful. But they are gearing up for the next round of bond cycle. And so I would encourage you, if you have concerns about funding and projects within the city of San Antonio for funding, which is always a shortfall and it's always a challenge, talk to those members, which I think are Debbie, Suzanne, and Neffy, but also to follow what the city is doing for that effort, because no one entity can do it all, and funds are critical to move any of these efforts forward. I felt like that was a good place to kind of slide that into the agenda. Item number 8, discussion and appropriate action regarding soliciting for the existing vacancy in the electric generating utilities interest group. So Ms. Doris Cooksey has retired from CPS. The administrative code requires that a representative of an electric generating utility sit on the regional flood planning group as a voting member. So we do need to take an action, which is an action to authorize SARA as the administrative entity to post a solicitation for the electric generating utilities vacancy. We've had some discussions with CPS already, which is good. And, they have expressed interest in backfilling Doris, but we do have to go through the process and see what nominations that we may get. But happy to take any questions before we put it to a motion. All right. And I would just like to say also thank you to Doris for supporting the committee these last 3 years. Gosh. But we appreciate that and her participation and support, and CPS's for allowing her to participate. So with that, could I get a motion to authorize SARA to post the solicitation for the electric generating utilities vacancy?
Dave Wegman, so moved.
I'll second.
Dave motion, Suzanne second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. The ayes have it, so that motion is approved. We will move forward with advertising. Item number 9, public comments. Kendall, do we have any public comments that have since come in?
No one has signed up to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 10, date and potential agenda items for the next meeting. You see it up on the screen there. Technical committee, Tuesday, February 25th, starting at 1:30, and then the full planning group on Monday, March 17th, starting at 2 p.m. Any concerns, agenda items that people want to put forward for those? Or Dave, any comments for the technical committee? Where you're green. There will be no beer on the St. Patrick's Day planning group meeting. Kendall, why are you looking at me? All right, so if that is all, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Debbie Reed motions to adjourn.
I'll second.
Suzanne, second. So we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.